Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, awesome. As you said, my name is Luciano Miranda. Very important that it's named Luciano because Luciano would make me Italian, and with the World Cup, I'm Argentinian, so you can imagine who I'm cheering for. But I go by Luch. Okay, I have the privilege of leading the analytics and insights organization for Medtronic, right? And often, my wife says, Luch, what do you do, right? Like, how do I explain this to people? So I've been thinking about it, right? And what I can tell you is that what we do, and I used to with my team, is very simple. Yes, we provide analytics. Yes, we use AI. Yes, we do dashboards. Yes, we do all this. But our privilege is that we provide information to people so they can make better decisions and improve business results, period. That's our entire job, okay? And we get to do it for Medtronic. So let's see if I can get my clicker working. There we go. So who is Medtronic? So Medtronic is a leader in the health tech industry, right? So we are fairly large companies. Our fiscal year just ended, reported $36 billion of sales. We help about 72 million patients per year, located in 150 plus countries, right? Multitude of distribution center, manufacturing, et cetera. So it's a fairly large organization. And like I said, my team does this for all of operations. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today, right? So this is the journey that I will take you through, right? So how we went, true story, from a team of 5 to now more than 170, from one squad doing a small function to now more than 30, and from supporting one function to now doing something holistically end-to-end, which is truly where the value is, right? So we support supply chain, supplier management, manufacturing, OpEx, integrated business planning, customer care, order operations, credit services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So we've been able to integrate that all. And I'm going to show you, how we did that. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you something very, very personal. My marriage is built on a lie. So when I met my wife, Lena, a weekend we knew that, things were going pretty well. And she goes, Luch, she pulled me aside, and she's like, Luch, you need to know something about me, right? I'm like, okay, so keep in mind, we're like 20 years old. She's like, listen, last year I was diagnosed with stage 3B stomach cancer. I'm like, what, right? And she goes, my chances of surviving 5 years are 25%. And I remember thinking about that. I'm like, this woman seems amazing. I'm like, I'll take those odds, right? The issue was that many years later, we found out that the real odds, she enlarged it a little bit, was actually 16%. Now, I joke around with her, obviously, because she's one of the lucky ones, right? But I joke around and say, listen, I'm in data and analytics. Everything for me is probability. You would have told me 16%, I would have maybe made a little bit different decision. So you can imagine how well that conversation goes. But obviously, I want to make it clear, Lena's one of the lucky ones, right? She was able to survive it, right? And I was one of the lucky ones because I got to see this woman's mindset, right? And she used to come to me and she's like, Luch, we have these talks, and she's like, she had a very clear goal. She goes, look, I can't control the outcome. This terrible disease may come back to me, right? Particularly in the first 5 years, with anybody that's gone through this, is horrible, right? But she's like, but you know what? I am going to make myself the strongest version I possibly can. So that if this comes back to me, it's going to find me in my strongest self. Now, I may win or lose the battle, right? Because there's obviously a factor of luck in there as well. But it will not be because I didn't make my strongest version of myself. And to be honest, that has been such an incredible lesson because I've been able to take that into the corporate world, right? And I've seen many, I remember going through cycles of data and analytic transformations, right, through many years. We're going to transform and so on. But to me, the missing piece in every single data and analytics transformation, and now AI, obviously, which is even bigger, is the mindset, right? So I took the lesson from Lena, right? So we came with a very clear goal, right, for what we wanted to do. And it's so simple to say, but difficult to do, right? Because especially think about now with AI. AI is incredible. It's amazing. It can help us, but it also can be seen as a huge threat. So how do we help our people look at AI from analytics, right, or whatever you're producing in the analytical world, right, from a position where is there to help them, is there to amplify them, is there to support them, not necessarily there to judge them. And that's a really important step that needs to be thought of, because a lot of times the technology is the easiest part, right? It's the change management of the people, getting everybody rallying around you, that's incredibly difficult. So I'm going to use another example. I've had the privilege of also playing sports my entire life, which also taught me many lessons. And you can, if you play sports or you watch sports, right? I'm sure you've seen teams, right, that have great structure, amazing coaching, but the wrong mindset and they don't win. And there are other teams that have incredible talent, again, great coaching, but the wrong mindset, and they also don't win, right? And you see this sometimes with the salaries that some of these teams win. Obviously, we all wish that the Blue Jays would have given me an example last year by actually winning the World Series. And then you have other teams that maybe don't have the best talent per se, but somehow find a way to win over and over again, right? And for us, I'll share a story with you guys. This is going back. There was a league many years ago called the Canadian Professional Soccer League, right? And our team we did not have the best players, okay? Not even close. And I remember there was a team called Toronto, Croatia, which was actually really good. They beat us like 6-0 in the regular season. And now, and after that game, I recall going into the locker room and saying, guys, we need to change something here, right? It was myself and other leaders in the team. And what we changed was our mindset on how we approached the game, right? We decided to start playing for each other. We started to play to our strengths, right? And started, there's a lot of talk, obviously, always about diversity and inclusion is one of the things we all, I'm sure, love about Canada. But we really used that diversity for a strength. And we ended up playing the Toronto Croatia team again in the semifinals. And this time we beat them 1-0. Now, we only took one shot. I think they took like 30 on us, so there was a little bit of luck going there. But the only thing that changed was the mindset. Same players, same coach, same structure. Everything else was the same, right? Now, I wish I could tell you we won the finals against Ottawa. We did not. We lost, but that's okay because we won because of the lesson that we got through that, right? And think about how that's applicable in your business, right? And when you're trying to push an AI project or an analytical project into fruition, into real tangible value. So now I want you to think about, if we think about dashboards or even AI solutions, right? But how many of you have really good dashboards that people are not using or really good information that's going unseen, right? So for us, a huge change was when I recall this. And this is the power that we all have, and particularly in leadership, because some of these things that I'm going to show you, that growth that I told you about from 5 to 170, you can do bottoms up, and we did quite a bit for it, but you need support, tops down. And I remember that what we did is we said, okay, we had the technology, we had obviously the things we needed to get going, but we said we need to come up with a brand, right? So we branded our analytics insights, because in 2021, they asked us, they said, Luch, we want you guys to now do the analytics, not just for your little piece of the business, because we had analytic groups, basically teams everywhere doing analytics. And they said, this is causing a massive problem, right? This was the time when Power BI, Tableau was coming, were very popular. And I remember saying, it's like, hey, the best thing about Power BI as an example, or Tableau, is like, anyone can build a dashboard. But you know what the worst thing about these tools are? Anybody can build a dashboard, right? So you end up with thousands of dashboards or multiple versions of the same truth, right? So we needed to solve that. And we did that both bottoms up and tops down. And one of the stories I like to share, which I knew we hit the inflection point, was our senior vice president at the time. Basically, they were in a meeting, right? And I remember observing meetings. I don't know if you guys have had this experience where like people go into a meeting with analytics, right? And half the meeting is pretty much fighting to see or discussing, right, to see whose data is right, right? Versus talking about the problem. And I know the key to this, like a huge inflection point for me was I was in a meeting and we had a product that was not performing very well. And one of the analytics said that the product availability was 89.7%, and the other one said 89.3%, and people argued for 50 minutes about who was right. And I was like, this isn't the land of who cares, folks. Like, let's call it 89.5 and move on, because it starts with 89, right? So clearly there's a problem here. So that's why we created this brand called Insights. And the story that I want to tell you about the SVP is the fact that, somebody tried that, and he basically said, unless this is insights, I'm not looking at it. Game over, right? All of a sudden, our usage, right, when obviously we had to produce good products, but it went incredibly up. Like, think about that. That needed zero investment, right? It was not difficult to do. It was just the behaviors that, that was emulated by our senior leader. Now, obviously, right now we're in the age of AI. Everybody's super excited about it, and we're getting a lot of presentations, as I'm sure you are as well, on the power of AI, and which got us to come up with this model, right? Which I think the lady before us talked about it, right? Said a lot of AI projects fail, and that's why if you have a good one, make sure you patent it, right? But from my perspective, a lot of the failures come because we start with AI first. Right? Or we have the technology chasing a problem, right? So it's AI, structure, people, mindset, right? And that, in my experience, does not work very well. Or again, it's all probability, right? Your probability of being successful is much lower. You may hit one every once in a while, but it's much lower that will succeed. That will succeed. Where the contrast to it is what you see below in yellow, right? Which is if you start with mindset first. What is our mindset? My team exists to provide people with information so they make better decisions. My team cannot win. It's impossible for us to win unless the business wins, right? So when we started this, for example, on time in full was around 78% when there was a major change, right? And obviously none of us were winning at that point, right? That has increased significantly since then. But again, it all starts with the mindset, then the people, then structure, and then put AI, so AI amplifies you. So I'll show you, a model that you can take, if you wish, on how that worked very well for us. So the model is, mindset is your foundation. To me, it all starts there. It's particularly now with AI, folks, right? Like AI, we can do anything, and I'll show you some examples, right? But it's incredible the things that we can do today, right? I have a person on my team who literally 10 months ago did not know how to code in React and did not know much of Python. He's built a whole, which I probably need to talk to the lady about patenting it, but he's built a whole system on conversational AI that challenges some of the big players, right? All using AI to build AI, all because he had the mindset of solving that problem. And the problem for us was removing friction in that particular case. Then starts with the people, then the structure, then AI, and obviously what this talks about, which is ultimately what are the results. So let's start with people. So how do we build this? So first, to me, is curiosity, right? We have to have curiosity in what we do, especially now in the age of AI, because a lot of things is the power of our questions. The better our questions, the better AI. You ask AI a non-sophisticated question or not a question that's well structured, AI will answer. And man, is AI confident. And by the way, if you're ever having a bad day, I'm sure you use it. For me, it's like I go to ChatGPT, I'm like, hey, this is Luch. I'm like, Luch, you are the best person ever. Like, this is the best question you've ever asked, right? I don't know if you had that experience. But curiosity to keep asking, like curiosity to, can I build this? Can I do this, right? The other piece is, is ownership, right? Extreme ownership for us is to own the tools and the systems that we have. And then finally, the belief, not just in ourselves, but also in the organizations that we're serving, that the tools and systems that we're providing them are there to help them be better. All right, so the other piece is, what I'd like to say is like most people don't need more data. I just heard, was it 10 minutes ago that we're running out of data. I did not know that, so I learned something. But it's not that we need more data, but it's like we need to have people the belief that the data is there to help them, right? To amplify them. The other piece is people, right? So how do we build people? When you look at, I'm sure everybody's familiar with IQ and EQ, right? So the intelligence and the emotional, and that's obviously continuously being incredibly important. But I believe there is a third one now, which is TQ. And this is particularly important for executives and leaders, right, in companies, to make sure that TQ is technology quotient, right? Because people emulate what we do and what our leaders are doing. And particularly as you're starting to get a lot of these, opportunities, let's call them, right, from many, many vendors, right? It's really important that we have a good foundation on technology quotient because we need to give this to our people. I feel that IQ and EQ alone are not longer sufficient, right? That we need to have at least some technology quotient in order to continue to drive. Why? Because AI is an absolute game changer. The other piece is the structure, right? So back in 2022, so in 2021, we amalgamated to global supply chain, right? So we brought all those teams, remember I told you about, right? Brought them together for global supply chain, and then they said, hey, this is working so well, we now want you to do it for all of operations, all those 10 functions that I just showed you earlier. And I'm like, whoa, we have to be careful here, because if we become a traditional centralized organization, yes, we're going to drive standards, but we may get too far away from the business. If we go too far to the decentralization, yes, you get more speed, right? But then you start going back to the problem we had before when you have too many versions of the truth. So what do? So we said, well, we build software in a way, right? Let's look at what other people are doing, right? And there was this really cool video on Spotify. I think it's still on YouTube, if you ever want to search it. And it shows how they work in squads, right? And we were kind of working in that way. So that's what we did, right? Is we basically took a lesson from that, adapted it, obviously, to our model. And what we did is we centralized the standard. So we centralized the how. We brought all the people, the technology, everything was centralized, right? So how things are built is, we define it. What we build is defined by the customers, right? The functions that we serve. And that's a huge difference, right? So you guys have heard of the hub and spoke model, right? For me, the hub and spoke model works great if you have very, very strong governance. But if you don't, it could be dangerous of becoming a check the box, make you feel good, but at the end of the day, everybody does whatever they want, right, behind the scenes, depending how big your organization is, of course. So to us, this was key, right, because everybody in our structure basically rolls up into one organization. So again, we borrowed from others outside that were doing this better than us, and then brought it in, and it's worked incredibly well, right? So our teams, even though they report into my organization, right, the customer feels like they report to them, right? And we've been able to elevate the skills and talent. I mean, I can tell you the stuff the team is doing now is light years away. And the difference is that before, when we had teams that were all separated, there was some incredible talent, but they weren't amplifying each other because they were in different teams, right? Now, all of a sudden, you put all of these folks together, like minds, and they're like literally, pushing each other upwards. The next piece is AI, right? So to me, AI is no longer the differentiator. I was reading about this, and when you look at, obviously, something we really need is data, and clean data, or good data. Then you need the frontier models, right? Which we all in this room have access to. But the most important part as well is your data and the context. That's the differentiator, right? So what context, what business context are you giving these frontier models, right? So they understand your business and then get that extra intelligence, right, that's driven from the context that you give. So one of our conversational AI tools, right, that we developed has something called Skill Builder, which is to give the context. I mean, anybody can take a spreadsheet loaded to a frontier model, and the frontier model you can chat with it, no problem. But it needs to have the context in order to give you, you go from mediocre answers to phenomenal answers, right? Once you start putting context into it, and we're seeing it firsthand. And the other comment I want to give you is like, To me, AI amplifies what's already there. And that's why I'm so big on, or we are so big on mindset, right? If you have the right, if you have curiosity in the teams, AI will amplify that curiosity. If you have fear, AI will definitely amplify the fear, right? And we see that, obviously, Medtronic being so big, we see that in different areas, right, that we have the opportunity to see. So to me, right, and what we're seeing is AI doesn't really create intelligence in organizations, but it's the curious people, right? Even asking yourself, imagine going back and, I'm successful if you ask yourself this question when you go back to work maybe tomorrow, is what question am I not asking that I should be asking? I love that question, right? Even asking AI that, right, in context, like, hey, what should I be asking you that I'm not asking you? It will tell you, right? And if you put it in ruthless mode, it will really tell you, right? So one time it actually told me, I'll share this with you, make myself vulnerable, but it said, Luch, you're a VP. You cannot be asking this question. So I'm like, come on, give me a break. So let's talk a little bit about what curious people can do. So we got curious, and we said, well, I'm going to do this presentation. How do I tell you, and I can describe our journey, right, from my team from 2021 till today. But I'm like, can I do this through a music video, right, in 30 seconds or less? So let's see if I was successful. Uh-oh. I was not. Oh. Spreadsheets, numbers overflow. Copy paste chaos moving way too slow. I was in the grind, but the value's thin. Chasing after data just to start again. Yeah. Insight steps in, flips the whole equation. Takes the how I learn, builds a new foundation. Now it's not the task, it's the question I choose. Sharper questions and ops, that's how we win and move. So what's fascinating is I am not a video designer. I never created a video. God, I cannot sing, right? So the lyrics, the music, and the video all produced with AI, right? And it took me about 4 hours to do that, right? So that's what we can do today. It's just by asking that question. Right? Literally, I'm like, can I do this? And it's like, oh yeah, we can, right? And I'm sure now we can probably do it even faster, right? So again, that's a little bit of fun, but what can you do in your organizations, right? By asking different questions. So what have been the results? Right? Because we talked about mindset, right, et cetera, et cetera. So here are the results. So when we started our journey, there were about 5,000 monthly views in the system that we took over. Today, we're over 500,000, okay? We had about a couple of hundred users that were going into the global systems. Now we have more than 14,000 that go in every month. From an automation standpoint, this number has doubled this year, so here I have it at 360. I just got new numbers. We did about 600,000 of automation hours, right? Just by using, and sometimes, guys, it's not complicated technology. A big part of that is a good old Power Automate with Power BI combined with Windshuttle, right? And some of it is much more sophisticated, like we currently have 7 digital workers on the team, right? So, but it doesn't have to be super complicated in order to get massive amount of efficiencies. And the number here, which is obviously the biggest one, and I can tell you that this is actually less than what it is in analytics, we don't generate the value ourselves. Somebody needs to act on the analytics, so we call it enable value. So we've had over $1 billion of enable value, right? Which has been absolutely amazing for us. And what's cool is how we started, because this whole journey started with a budget of less than $100,000. It started with a $13 a month Power BI license. And the belief that we could be potentially a world-class analytics organization, right? So I like sharing this because often they say, well, Luci, you work for like a multinational. Of course, like we have a lot of resources now, but even within a big multinational, when you start, sometimes you don't have a lot of resources, right? And I'm sharing this because this is the power of mindset. So a big thing for us, which you can take, is three things as I look back into the journey that really worked for us. One was read, right? So we read a lot of different from people that are best in the world. So we love the book. If you take one action, I would say if you haven't read the book Atomic Habits, this is the one about getting 1% better every day, right? Phenomenal book. Aligning the organization, starting with the why. I don't know if you guys know. Simon Sinek is pretty famous, right? So he has a book, Start With Why. I can tell you those things work, right? Obviously you have to know your audience. They work, and they also work for you, right? Because it gives you a big purpose to enjoy the journey. And then, developing the IQ, the EQ, and the TQ, but purposefully, right? Within your business, within your organizations. Because 1% better every day takes a $13 a month license and converts it into well over $1 billion worth of value, right? Now, what could be the value for your organizations? So Monday morning, I would say, right, or tomorrow, things you can take from there is number one, foremost, stay curious, right? And ask yourself, what questions should I be asking that I'm not really asking, right? Take ownership. Show your team the behavior that you want them to emulate, right? And then celebrate the wins, like it's a World Cup win, right? Or a World Series win. Celebrate them so that people go into the journey, right? And again, it doesn't happen overnight, obviously, but through time, we've seen this over and over again, leading to massive amount of results. And I think now with AI as an accelerator, that journey can be even a lot faster. So to me, again, the future doesn't belong to the organizations with most data, right? But it's all about curiosity. I read somewhere that I'm supposed to repeat something 7 times, so I think I'm about 6 on curiosity, so there's my 7th, so I should be done by now. But remember that, right? Curiosity, particularly with AI, is absolutely massive. Now, going back to Lena, so she, of course, wasn't going to just, had a very rare disease, right? Like I think 0.001% chance of things happening. So then when we had our daughter, Liana, we faced that. Remember how I told you she wanted to be the strongest version of herself? Well, she did that because of the disease she had, but this was tested for something else. So when our daughter Liana was born, my wife was actually diagnosed with placenta accreta. Now, if you don't know what that is, that's when the placenta grows into the uterus, but it's undiagnosed, so you can bleed out, right? So thanks so much, always so thankful to Credit Valley and the entire staff there, right, for the job that they did. But basically, she needed about 21 bags of blood. So you can imagine how much that is, right? There was a lot of medical device, right, and healthcare in the room, right? And thankfully she's okay, and so is Liana. But what was the most impressive thing of this whole thing? The next day. So we were in the room, and I remember the doctors walking in, right? So the doctor comes in, and there's different doctors, as they come into the room, and they pick up her chart, and they look at the chart, and I remember watching this, and they look at her, and they look at the chart, and they look at her. They could not believe that this woman had gone through what she went through the day before. And the only reason that was because this got her into the strongest version of herself. Now, in business, folks, it's the same thing, right? Like when things are good and so on, we need to work even harder to become super strong because the crises do come, right? And to us, right, a crisis doesn't, yes, a crisis can build you, but a crisis doesn't build you. To me, a crisis reveals you, right? And what it reveals is the mindset that you spend time building. Thank you.
Amazing session. Stay up there because I'm sure we'd love to have a few questions.
Sure.
So much to dive into there. Who's got a question for Luciano? Okay, we've got one over there. Mic runners, can I just see anyone else want a question? Just show of hands. Okay, well, we'll start with the lady over there.
Thank you very much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm Jenna Melnick. I'm with Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. My question is around that $1 billion number in business value. I'm sure all of us are in the same boat, struggling to link the value of the insights to the actual impact and the business value that they provide. So what feedback mechanism or what do you use as a way to link the utilization of the dashboard, the insights that the users are getting to the actual business impact?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question because, and we struggle with that significantly because obviously there's an investment on our team. And for me, it's like I have to show that what they're investing in us, right? It's return. And it's so difficult because, okay, fine, so I give you a backorder dashboard. Now backorders go from, in the heyday in COVID from like, let's say a few hundred million to now, below that significantly. Now, was that the dashboard? Was that something else? Could you have done it without the dashboard? It's really, really challenging, right? So we had a lot of conversations with Gartner about this as well, right, as to what is the best practices. And this came probably later in our maturity. So what we do is now we've earned the right when people ask us to do something for them, right, or to say, hey, because we have more work that we can do, we work with our business partners to say, what is this worth? What is the value you're going to get in? And this is a true story. Sometimes people get really upset because we can't deliver a KPI dashboard, let's say, right, or a KPI. But meanwhile, I have my resources working on a $100 million problem, right? So the way we measure it is we take snapshots of when the dashboard or when we started working with the organization, we partner with them, and that's where we're very careful to use enable value, because again, I could create or we can create the best dashboard ever, or the best analytic, or the best AI, but we're not the ones taking the action. It's the business, right? It's the planner. It's the, particularly now with tariffs, I'm sure we're all dealing with that, right? Like it's the customs folks that are dealing with that. So what we do is we say, hey, this is the enable value, right? Like completely, and then we probably divide it by 5 because we don't know if this, for example, like we had one. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but we had a situation where there was about $2 billion of revenue that was at risk for us, right? Now this happened 2 years ago, so it's public knowledge. But without the analytics that we provided, which used AI, right, it was quite complex. We were able to basically mitigate that entire risk. Now the question is, without the analytic or without the AI that we use, we haven't, how much would you have done? Because you can't really say that it would be 0, right? Because people are resourceful, but you also cannot say that it would have been the full 2 billion, because we know that that what we did really helped. So what we do is we say we take the maximum amount, and then we just divide it literally by a factor of 5 to say this is what we enabled as value. And honestly, the numbers are so big that they more than justify the organization. And then again, the big piece though, what I would tell you is don't make that be your number, make that be the business number. Now is their number. We're just we're a player on the field with them that enabled them to do that. But it's their win, not ours, right? Our win is the fact that we enabled it. So really, really challenging. If somebody has a better way of doing it, I'm all open because this is something we struggle with. But that's how we settled in order to come up to a value. Does that answer your question? My pleasure.
Okay, excellent. Any other last questions? Okay, Luciano, that was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really done. Okay, cheers.
Thanks.